Larry Hoover has been incarcerated since 1973. At this rate, it's highly unlikely that he'll ever see the outside world again. This former leader of Chicago's gangster disciples is currently serving multiple life sentences at the prison known as ADX Florence, which has a reputation for being one of the most psychologically punishing correctional facilities in the entire world. After being charged with murder in the 1970s, Larry would later be convicted of running the gangster disciples from inside his prison cell. That was in 1997, and every single day since then, Larry has been forced to spend 23 hours in solitary confinement. His case is widely regarded as hopeless because in order to be released, he would need to obtain pardons at both the state and federal levels. Well, in order to accomplish just that, hip-hop superstars Drake and Kanye West recently set aside their widely publicized differences to throw a benefit concert in Larry's name and raise awareness over his plight. So how exactly did Larry Hoover's reputation grow even larger from behind bars, and just why have Kanye and Drake teamed up to see him released? Those answers and more in our latest episode of Before They Were Famous. Larry Hoover was born on November 30th, 1950 in the city of Jackson, Mississippi. At the age of 4 years old, Larry's parents moved his family to Chicago, Illinois, and from that point forth, Larry and his new hometown would become inseparable. At the age of just 13, Larry hit the Chi-Town streets with a bunch of like-minded youths who took to calling themselves the Supreme Gangsters. Together, this group would take part in petty crimes such as theft and muggings, but soon enough, Larry's criminal activity would graduate to shootings and assaults. A high school dropout, over the course of his teenage years, Larry would ascend to leadership roles in the Supreme Gangsters before joining forces with David Barksdale to form the Black Gangster Disciple Nation. After Barksdale was injured during a shooting that took place in 1969, Larry would assume the leadership role of the Gangster Disciples. From that point on, his gang ran the south side of Chicago's drug trade, making more than $1,000 a day in profits by selling large quantities of cocaine, heroin, and other drugs. By the time that he had entered his early 20s, Larry had been in and out of prison a number of times. He had also survived at least 6 separate attempts on his life. I mean, basically, Larry was the personification of a made man. And then, everything changed. On February 26, 1973, Larry and fellow Disciple member Andrew Howard were arrested for the murder of 19-year-old rival drug dealer William Young. Shortly thereafter, the two men were then each sentenced to 200 years in prison. I swear to God, I'm not making this up.
Hoover is arrested and charged with murder. And although he never pulled the trigger, Hoover is found guilty and sentenced to 150 to 200 years. 23 years old, in Statesville maximum security, with 2 football fields facing him for numbers, Hoover still continues to grow.
Perhaps most amazingly of all, however, is the belief held by federal prosecutors that even after his incarceration, Hoover would continue to run the Gangster Disciples from his prison cell and oversee a business that could bring in as much as $100 million over the course of a single year. Yeah, we thought Gucci Mane was crazy for being able to release all those mixtapes while he was still in prison. Yeah, Larry Hoover was on some different energy. But here's where the disconnect comes in, because both the federal authorities and the everyday citizen on the Chicago street seem to have completely conflicting ideas of just who exactly Larry Hoover really is. To the government, he's a cold-hearted leader of a ruthless gang whose orders to injure, maim, and sometimes even kill are carried out with ruthless aggression.
Larry Hoover was the undisputed leader of the largest monolithic gang in the nation.
But to the people on the streets of Chicago, Larry Hoover has become something of a mystic figure over the course of his incarceration, a mix of Robin Hood with Al Capone. Today, thousands of young kids on the Chi-Town streets look up to this man who was already behind bars long before they were anything but a twinkle in the eye of their parents. According to Hoover's lawyer, the decades that Larry has spent locked away has changed who he is as a person. I mean, after all, when Larry first went back to prison in the 70s, Richard Nixon was still president. And since then, Larry has come to realize that the violence on the streets of Chicago has become untenable. His lawyer told the New York Times, he saw the death, the destruction, the prisons filling up with the young people. He wanted to move the Gangster Disciples into something constructive, into growth and development. So from behind his prison walls, Larry was said to have organized the creation of a political organization called 21 Street Century Vote, which registered hundreds of young people on the streets of Chicago to vote, as well as Save the Children, a charitable organization that held rallies in support of education reform, as well as health clinics in Chicago's poorest neighborhoods.
Well, I've been working over the past 2 years to try to redirect the energies of my immediate organization. I was one of the principal components in forging the United Peace Organization, which is designed to stop kids from killing each other. I know what they're doing. I see the mistakes. I've made the mistakes. I'm in position to maybe correct them before they make the same mistakes I made.
The group is also said to have taken an active interest in neighborhood cleanup and food distribution, programs which led Hoover's prosecutor to admit that the Gangster Disciples had done some good stuff, even going so far to say during the court proceedings, this is not a group of street thugs. This is in a very real sense an outlaw form of government. But as the Gangster Disciples were actively moving towards growth and development in the mid-90s, the US government intensified their investigation of Hoover and his operations even further.
Today, police spent about 2 hours combing through the records of Save the Children on the South Side. They seized half a dozen cardboard boxes and file cabinets of financial records and also $7,000 in cash. Police say the charity organization has legitimate operations, but they also believe it is a front for an effort to get Hoover out of jail.
In 1997, Hoover was investigated on federal drug conspiracy and extortion charges while continuing to engage in criminal enterprises from prison. Momentarily reflecting on the good that Hoover had done for his community, the prosecution said, "They registered voters, which is a wonderful thing. The problem is, it was funded by drug money and supported by gang muscle." In order to indict Hoover on all of these charges, the feds would wire up his associates who would visit him in prison so as to record their conversations. Out of the 65 hours of conversations recorded, only 4 hours would be used against Hoover in his 1997 trial, but it was enough to convict him. On those tapes, he would discuss taxing anybody who sells drugs in the Gangster Disciples territory, as well as having his members devote 1 day a week to selling drugs strictly for Hoover's own profits, which could bring the kingpin an estimated total of around $300,000 a week. The end result of this investigation was that Hoover was given a further 6 life sentences on top of his already 200-year sentence in order to spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. Since this indictment in the late 90s, Larry has unsuccessfully filed for an appeal to be freed, or at the very least transferred to a lower security prison under the First Step Act, which is a way for prisoners to challenge extremely long sentences for federal drug offenses. His appeal was rejected outright, and the judge would refer to Hoover as one of the most notorious criminals in Illinois history during his 19-page rebuttal. Meanwhile, Chicago native Kanye West has made it his personal project over the past few years to try and get more exposure to Hoover's plight. During Kanye's visit to the Trump White House a few years ago, he brought Hoover up to the president and asked him for presidential pardon.
So it's very important for me to get Hoover out, because in an alternate universe, I am him. And I have to go and get him free, because he was doing positive inside of Chicago, just like how I'm moving back to Chicago, and it's not just about.
After Trump never pardoned Larry, Kanye took a recording of Hoover's son pleading with the powers that be to release his father and incorporated it into his newest album, Donda, at the end of the track, Jesus Lord.
It was a good thing, and to hear the people kind of felt what I was saying, it made my father, they told me it made my father seem like a human being. Yeah. They only knew him as Larry Hoover, leader of the Gangster Disciples, rah, rah, rah. Mm-hmm. But they don't know him, and they don't know what he's about. And that's why I'm trying to make an effort to, show who he is as a person.
Most recently, Kanye teamed up with fellow hip-hop superstar Drake, burying their beef with one another to put together an all-star-like benefit show to raise awareness for Larry Hoover's struggles. Over 70,000 people filed into the LA Memorial Coliseum to take part in the free Larry Hoover benefit show, which costed a reported $10 million and was even sponsored by Amazon. Imagine that, 2021, we got Drake and Kanye all on the same stage, sponsored by Jeff Bezos. I don't know, if you told me this in 2017, I don't know if I'd believe you. Up on stage, Kanye and Drake danced, rapped, and hugged it out on top of a giant mound in the middle of what's usually a football field. The only thing they didn't spend much time on was the idea of freeing Larry Hoover. What the entire night was supposed to be about. Once the show got started, there was hardly a mention of his name. But hey, at the very least, Kanye has reportedly hired the lawyer who had just helped free Bill Cosby to represent Larry Hoover next.
It's so funny, she came by the studio and she wanted to take a picture with her friend, and I told her, don't take any pictures. She's like, oh, she ain't got nothing phone. I was like, let me see her phone. And she stood up, she started screaming at me. She's like, I don't even gotta be at the studio. I do stuff that's important. I say, I do stuff that matters. She started screaming on me in the studio. I was like, I like her.
So maybe, and just maybe, Larry Hoover's story is not over yet, and before long, we might be talking about he's finally a free man. Although I would not hold your breath. Of course, that remains to be seen because this is before they were famous. And before we wrap things up here, I just wanted to shout out another one of our channels called Famous Life. We do a whole bunch of videos over on that channel, so if there's any real A-list celebs that you want to see documented, let us know so we can cover them over on Famous Life. My name is Clyde Smith, and if you guys enjoyed this video, please remember to both like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in another video.